Dr. Priya Naran. Please share your screen, Dr. Priya. She is a very senior phacosurgeon from Ahmedabad. She's prolific in academics and teaching. She's much sought after in many conferences. She has an international fame and name, a lot of publications and books and videos. And she's known in the academic circles in the American Academy and the ESCRS, in the ASCRS for her presentations and videos. She's a master of glue diol and pupilloplasty techniques especially. She's also the scientific committee chairman of the Gujarat Ophthalmic Society, doing great work. Priya, you can take over and give your experience, then we'll discuss a few points about that. Please share your screen, Dr. Priya. Are you on, Priya? We seem to have lost her connection a bit. We'll just wait for a minute or so for her to come back. I was very impressed by Dr. Kulkarni's loud and clear message, very clear about what he went through, what he feels is needed, and what he has advised other people to follow. We appreciate that again. And I wanted to ask you, how low did the SpO2 go at any time for you, if you can answer that question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, my lowest SpO2 was 83 to 85 without oxygen. So I used to feel tired going to the washroom, but that was the lowest. But I required very low support with NIV, very low PEEP. I didn't require a high PEEP or a high oxygen level. So FiO2 was never more than 70%. So they started with 70 and gradually brought it down to 40. And the duration was also reduced, and I was switched between NIV and high flow oxygen.
Great. We seem to have Priya back. Your screen is visible. Please start.
I hope you can see that full screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost full screen. That's fine. Very readable.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. So at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Mukesh Porwal and Dr. Suketu for giving me this opportunity to come over here, and maybe I can just share some of the experiences that we have gone through in recent times. So anyway, the topic that has been entitled to me, I don't know how far I go ahead with this, but the point is that, you know, you always need the guidance from the person on the top to help you come out of this situation. So I'm just going to talk about the personal experiences that we experienced as a family, and how we tried to navigate through this, obviously with the help of everybody, all near and dear ones around us. So I just begin this talk because, you know, the major positive or the negative thing about this disease is the name scare. People are so scared, be it doctors or be it a non-medical person, being a COVID positive. Somewhere down the line, many people that I have seen across, they come across the fear of being a COVID positive because, you know, there is a lot of stigma which is associated with this disease because probably it's very infective. And once it enters your family, if any one person gets it, it's very difficult to isolate and, you know, prevent the others also from getting it, because then it all depends upon how careful you are and what the amount of viral load you are carrying and you're transmitting to others in the family despite taking all the precautions. So the main thing which is associated with this disease is the agony. The agony can be a mental and an emotional. because the entire family has to go through this, because there is a scare in the house that we have somebody positive, but it's a near and dear one. So we need to take care of the person, and we also need to take care of ourselves. So now that's a complete struggle which goes on, and it involves a lot of physical agony also, because you're constantly struggling, both physically, you're struggling emotionally, you are struggling mentally. And believe me, if you land up with this disease in a severe form, you will always also come across financial restrictions which might come your way. And because at the end of the day, you need to pay the bills of the hospital, and it all depends upon how much duration of stay is there in the hospital, and it actually depends upon the severity of your disease. So basically, the entire family goes through all the agonies that can come through this. Plus, the negative point of this disease is none of your near and dear one can be physically present there to help you out. What they can do is they can just call you up, they can just give you emotional support, but beyond that, it is your struggle, it's your family's struggle, which you go through that. So I'll just highlight the practical things which we have just recently gone through in the last 2 to 3 weeks, which all started from end of May, 30th, 31st May. This entire story has started. It is probably I'm happy that it has almost nullified now, and we are through it as all of us together. So I'll just highlight my the COVID journey that Samir went on. We as a family went on to experience it. So there will be some take-home points also from this, because initially the patient, many a times, there are different, obviously there are different symptoms that different people come across with. Not everybody will have a low-grade fever. They have a different presentation. Somebody has this, somebody has diarrhea, somebody has a sore throat. Not everybody has a sore throat. Not everybody has the loss of smell and taste. But yes, when you have a low-grade fever, initially, it starts with something like 99 or 99.4. And many a times we tend to think that, okay, maybe I might have a normal flu, because we as human beings, we tend to pick up things that we think that, okay, we try to play defensive, that no, maybe I have a little bit of cold, maybe a little bit of sore throat, and it will go off. But actually, you have to be careful when you have a low-grade fever, especially during the pandemic. Consider it as corona unless and until it is proved otherwise. Isolate, try to figure it out that probably you're not a corona positive, but then it's not that easy to do that. So you have to be continuously monitoring yourself, your family members, maintain isolation in the family, because even if another person in the family gets it, probably even if you transmit the disease, it goes on a low viral load. So it all started with a low-grade fever initially for 3 to 4 days. On the 4th day, the fever starts to rise and it shoots up to 101 degrees. So then you're a bit scared. You keep on having the pulse oximeter at your home, and just because we are doctors, we know that we should have a pulse oximeter and we should keep on monitoring the oxygen level. But the take-home message for all those people who are non-medicals, you should be having a pulse oximeter in this pandemic in your house, because if you have a fever, you should be monitoring your oxygen level. That might indicate you, that might give you an indication, because not everybody is very much aware of this, the clinical symptoms that follow eventually. So there was a subjective feeling of tightness in the chest.
Sorry to interrupt, Priya.
Yeah.
The slides are not moving, I think. Just look into it. I think if you're moving the slides, I'm not seeing it moving.
No, I'm just presenting the sequential presentation. Can you see that?
No, actually, I can see the first slide, but not after that.
Because I have moved on to other slides.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, what do I do then?
Probably just restart quickly.
Should I exit and restart?
Yeah, I think so.
Let me do that. Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, now the slide is moved. Yeah.
Is it
sequential presentation? Now it is titled sequential presentation. Yeah.
Should I go full screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see this now?
Yeah, we can see the slide, almost very big size, but not full screen. But you can go ahead with this, no problem.
Oh, okay, fine, because I can see it full screen. Anyway, so it all started with, I will just go through this back again. Just started with a low-grade fever initially for 3 to 4 days. On the 4th day, the fever starts rising. It goes up to 101 degrees. There is a subjective feeling of tightness in the chest on the 5th day. And when we measured the SpO2 level, it is 98. So 98 is still, it's good enough you are not much worried. But what happens on the next day, on the 6th day, is in the morning he started feeling having much more tightness in the chest, So we decided that we need to go and get the high resolution CT scan done for him, because there are certain laws where you cannot get COVID, the nasal swab test, etc. done unless and until you're admitted in a hospital. So he wasn't admitted at that point of time. So we decided to get an HRCT done, and the benefits of getting an HRCT done initially have already been highlighted before. So yes, and HRCT was positive, and it showed the infiltration in both the lungs, which was present, and the typical ground glass appearance that happens to be in all the COVID patients. So that was seen. So now this is it's a red signal because you have fever and HRCT is positive. So probably, it's not probably, you are positive basically. So now what happens is, you have to now, at this point, it's the 6th day. So you have to decide what to go ahead with, because in COVID cases, the 7th day to 11th day, these are the tricky days, because this is the day where you have a cytokine rush in your body. And when you have a cytokine rush in your body, the things can go either way. So you have to be prepared for it. So the tightness of the chest was there. The SpO2 level came down a little bit down. It was showing 97. And so this was the time when we decided he needs to be admitted into the hospital, because he had an associated comorbid that's chronic asthma. So having 2 lung diseases, having a chronic asthma, and having the COVID, it is like an add-on effect on it. So having admitted in the hospital, throat swab was definitely taken, and it was also definitely positive. So that was a stamp by everybody and by the government that yes, the case is COVID positive. So now the struggle begins, because actually the struggle had already begun before, but this is where, when you have a documented thing in your hand and you know that yes, you are COVID positive. So now what happens actually is the struggle now begins, the actual struggle in the hospital, because then the breathlessness started increasing on exertion, and even going to the washroom is difficult. You experienced tightness. He experienced tightness in the chest on the day 8, and that was the night. At night time, at around about 12 o'clock, he was shifted from the room to the HDU, and the SpO2 levels dropped to 93. The serum ferritin levels increased. The C-reactive protein was raised, and everything, like all the tests, what you would consider doing in this was at a subnormal level. They were going down, and other levels were increasing in the body. And the medications that were initially when he was admitted, I think methylprednisolone and all these injections were already being given. So we all know the D-dimer values and everything. So injection methylprednisolone, injection Clexane. Initially, there was a lower antibiotic Monocept going on, which was later on shifted to meropenem, because going in the HDU, and you need to prevent secondary infections which are going on. And definitely when he was admitted, they had started with the hydroxychloroquine and all. So the X-ray chest on 9th day, it revealed that the patches of consolidation were there in both the lungs, and the consolidation, it increased further on the day 2, and they were very dense, with the SpO2 level going down to 87. So that is a point where they actually decided to give the injection tocilizumab, the Atramac, with the interleukin inhibitor, which was injected slowly over a period of 3 hours on day 12. So now this was actually the case where there was a lot of inflammation. There was associated cytokine rush, which was there in the body. The arterial O2 level also fall off to 54. So that was a point where BiPAP support was started. We all know what BiPAP is. I'll come on to later on to this. So BiPAP support was given for 3 days, and it was later on switched.
Next slide has not come up. In case you move, I'm sorry about that again. Something is not right. Okay. Yeah, now it's come.
Should I keep it like this only?
Yeah, you keep it like this. That's fine.
Or maybe I can again run through this. Is this fine?
Yeah, this is the X-ray chest slide on top, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the injection Atramac was again given, and this injection is usually given to block the interleukin sites, etc. in the body. So anyway, the arterial O2 level had started falling off. BiPAP was started later on. We were shifted over to the high flow nasal oxygen. So the continuous monitoring, nevertheless, to say when a patient is in HDU or an ICU, the continuous monitoring of vital parameters and everything, the alternate day lab investigations of CBC, CRP, ferritin, dimer, etc., is going on. But at the end of the day, it is always like, how your patient is actually responding and how much is the O2 level which is going on in this case. So this period was a very big struggle from day 11 to day 15 or so, because we were not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel. So this was a very difficult thing. But on 15th day, the condition started to stabilize, and with the SpO2 level, by the grace of God, it started going on to about 90 in supine, and with the prone position, 95. It was there, but then it needed was 10 liters of concentrated oxygen, which was being delivered. So the condition then eventually started improving. The O2 requirements started falling down. It came down to 5 to 6 liters. And then on the 19th day, it was discharged with oxygen support from the hospital, because we being as doctors, we could manage the oxygen support at home also, the minimal oxygen support that was actually needed. So home monitoring was going on for a few days with O2 support requirement. And the current O2 saturation that's going on is about 94 to 95, and we really expect that this to come back to normal maybe in the next 10 to 15 days, because I think it depends, the recovery depends upon patient to patient, and it also depends upon the amount of infection that you probably had in the initial things. But the point is that it is already almost 1 month which has passed by. I hope you can see the next slide. Can you see the next slide?
Not yet, Priya.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's moved. Oxygen support therapies. Yeah.
So the oxygen support therapies, outcome of a patient, it actually depends on many things. It depends upon the medical treatment that is being delivered, the monitoring which is going on for the patient, how vigilant and how effective and how good the entire staff, the doctors, the paramedical staff, they're taking care of the patient. Now we have very excellent oxygen support therapies, for COVID patients. The BiPAP, which is a bi-level positive airway pressure, which is given to these patients, it's a non-invasive kind of, but it's a positive pressure ventilation, which is given to the patients. BiPAP, it's a very technologically developed device, and it delivers oxygen at very reduced pressure during exhalation. So it actually helps you in breathing and gushing out the air into the alveoli. And that is how this it really works, and it's actually not a challenge for a patient to exhale when the entire BiPAP mask is there on the face. Actually, it's a very high pressure oxygen that is going on to the patient. So this is BiPAP is a very helpful device, and then eventually it was switched over to the high flow nasal cannula and prongs that was given. So close monitoring is actually very crucial to avoid any delay and in intubation. So these are the devices which really help you. And the moral of the story that I would really want to come up to is, it actually depends upon the infrastructure which is there in the hospital where you are admitted, where you can get the best of the non-invasive methods which can help you to come out of this tragic situation. So I think the pulse oximetry and clinical examination and everything, and this all is absolutely necessary for all these cases. And the moral that I would like to tell everybody, is that first is the early diagnosis. Do not remain in deception. If in this pandemic, if you have a low-grade fever, do not remain in deception that, okay, maybe you might have this or that, and probably it's not a corona because I cannot come in contact with corona. No, that's a very that's a very nice way of denying the truth which you might probably face. God save you do not have corona, but in case if it is there, if you are aware of the situation, that would help you. The other things that I would like to say is that, for the medical people, for doctors and all, I don't know how effective the prophylactic treatment with hydroxychloroquine and with zinc and everything is there, but yes, results have been documented, and I have seen almost all the doctors who are working in the COVID hospital, they're all taking precautions by taking hydroxychloroquine, they are taking zinc, they are taking vitamin C, they are taking Zincovit. So I think this is some of the things that maybe even if they might have or they might not have a benefit of it, but I've seen all of them taking. So probably somewhere down the line, community and take a prophylaxis of this, because there is no harm in taking it unless and until otherwise, because of any other reason, we cannot take a hydroxychloroquine. But I think it should be there. As doctors, we need to take proper treatment, development and care. It involves the pre-corona, during the corona, and even the post-corona, because the recovery of post-corona patients is also very important, and it often takes. You need to have a very good pulmonologist to review your patient, because the pulmonologist is the person who keeps on deciding what you need now and what you need later. So, and I would like to say that I would like to give all the credit to Dr. Amit Patel, who had taken so beautiful care of Samir, maybe examining him 2 to 3 times a day. And the pulmonologist is a very important person who plays a very important role in your recovery. And you need to have right kind of intervention. And the best part of all this is that it's easier to say that prevention is better than cure, but it is definitely prevention is better. Because, and I would recommend that everybody should take precautions against this, because whatever, like it was previously highlighted, wear a mask and everything, and you need to be very careful about it. Do not take it very casually, because when it strikes you really bad. And when it strikes to one person, the entire family almost gets involved. So even the entire family has to take care of this. But anyway, being the person being your loved one, you have to be there with your loved one. So you need to take care of yourself also. So I think with this, I would just end up with this, and I would end up by saying that God is great, and we all need to have faith in Him. And it's not you and me who decides what's going to be the outcome. It is He who decides what's the outcome. So thank you so much. And I would also like to thank all my friends and all my colleagues and everybody who showed so much of love and support during this trying times. Thank you so much. I'm greatly obliged to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya, for that excellent account, almost a day-to-day sequential account, and detailing to us what Samir went through. And by the way, for the benefit of audience, Samir Narang, Priya's husband, is a well-known ophthalmologist, phacosurgeon himself. And we are all happy that he has come out of it now after those trying 3 weeks. And I want to ask you, if you wish to answer this question, how easy or difficult was it to go through the procedures of medical reimbursements and mediclaims, if in any way that is useful in the scenario?
I would like to say the medical reimbursement. I have just put up the file for the medical reimbursement. So let me see what comes up, because within 1 week you're supposed to submit it. So it was a post claim. So I have just submitted. So I'm just waiting for them to respond to this, that how much claim would they be clearing.
We as doctors are usually on the other side, and we want to know what these companies say upright when they're faced with this situation.
Correct.
The proof of the pudding is in the eating.
That. Yes, I'm yet to face that.
I appreciate that. And regarding this SpO2, again, the same question: how low did it go to really make it scary, or at one point of time, I think it was very dodgy how to manage. So what is the safe level, you would say, for us as doctors?
Mukesh, I would like to say that, what everybody recommends is that you can continue home monitoring till you have an oxygen level, SpO2 level of 94 to 95. That's the level that most of the physicians, they tell you that, okay, if you have that much, you can remain at home, monitor yourself. But the moment you go below 94, you should get admitted in the hospital. Now, we had a situation, you have to take other practical things also into consideration. Taking the situation in Ahmedabad, it is very difficult to find a cot in the hospital right now. If you need a cot, even being a doctor, you have to struggle. You have to pull up all the strings to get into the hospital where you actually want to get into. First thing is that. So for our case, it was like when he got admitted, his SpO2 level was 97, 98. Without taking, and HRCT gave it positive. So without taking a second thought, that very same day in the afternoon, I got him admitted. I said, if nothing happens, it is fine. You'll be back home within 3 days. But if something happens, we cannot deal it at home, because there is an associated asthma also. So asthma is also going to add up to the inefficiency of the lung. Maybe if you start getting an asthmatic attack, so again, the SpO2 level will go down. So we won't even come to know. So on Sunday, 3 o'clock, I admitted him to the hospital, keeping fingers crossed that how things would go. Let us see. But we were, what happened on Monday night was drastic. The SpO2 level immediately, it was 98 in the evening and it went off to 93 at 12 in the midnight. So now that is scary. Now, if you have a patient at that stage at your home, it's not possible. Like at midnight, where do you go with the patient? So that becomes very difficult. So the judicious judgment has to be taken when you need to admit your patient into the hospital. The first thing is that. The second thing is it all depends upon how the disease progresses. So the outcome, it actually depends on that, how much your lungs are infiltrated and how much. And he had a very, quite a bit of involvement of the lungs when HRCT was done on the 5th day. So I did not take any chances and I think it paid off.
So he was admitted before he was known to be positive, right?
HRCT was positive.
HRCT
so he was admitted.
Positive. Yeah, okay.
Admitted, and the throat swab was taken after that because the government does not allow you to do the test unless and until you're admitted. So after that, yes. So after that, the throat swab was taken, and anyway, and so, but then no, we took a right decision. I took a right decision, to put him into the hospital and get him admitted because it was at 12 midnight. He was directly shifted from the room to the HDU. So that really works, because these are the critical points. I have seen patients struggling during this stage. This is not the stage to struggle. This has to be the stage where you have to be in the hospital where emergency treatment is can be made available, So that judgment has to come when you need to admit your patient because monitoring has to be there. You cannot monitor such tricky cases at home.
Yes. A great point. Yeah, because we as doctors think that we'll be able to manage or supervise and all that, but that is not the case.
Absolutely. It doesn't happen. It's like denying yourself the truth that you are going to face. It's like getting scared. I mean, it doesn't call for. We need to be mentally so decisive and sound to take that decision that no, this is the point. We need to admit the patient. If everything goes fine, it's perfect. Like the patient will come back home after 4 days, 5 days, But if something goes wrong on the other way, at least there is somebody to take care. We cannot do it at home. Yeah.
So you have to do your bit in time. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We can't thank you enough, Priya, for being so clear and candid about whatever you've gone through. I can't imagine very many people would be able to speak so confidently, so clearly about what they've gone through. Thank you again. We'll move on. I will want you to stay back to a comment on others' experiences too. And we would like to move on to Dr. Jagdish Rana's talk.